Welcome to another episode of Home Visit with Tyler Siskey and the Associates. Today we're going to be riding solo. We're going to talk. I want to spend some time on the draft, talk about some guys in the draft that I've got to know over the years. Since the draft's coming up next Thursday, I want to get some draft stuff in because probably next week, by the time you listen to it, the draft will be going on or had already taken place. So I want to get some stuff out there about the draft this week. We're going to dip a little bit into got some more calls on the insane money being thrown around NIL-wise with high school prospects and kind of where that sits, especially since we're talking about the NFL today. Visit briefly about the USFL that started this past weekend. All had 3 games yesterday and a game on Saturday night. And then we'll get you guys out of here. So sit back and relax and enjoy this week's episode of Home Visit. All right, we have the draft coming up next Thursday. And the mock drafts, and if you listen to the experts, everybody is all over the place about the number 1 pick. All right, so the number 1 pick is going to the Jacksonville Jaguars as of today. And you got some people who are saying Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan will be the number 1 pick. I just don't see it. I don't even think he's the best defensive end in the draft. And when you're picking number 1, you better have a bona fide dude. And when you got Trevor Lawrence, who you invested in last year, and look, the Jacksonville Jaguars have spent an incredible amount of money in the offseason and free agency to get him tools. It's very clear to me Evan Neal is a no-brainer. He is, last year you had Penei Sewell, who went to Detroit and did unbelievable things for them all season. These guys don't come along every day, every decade. I mean, they're once in generational talents. This guy's 6'7", he's 350 pounds, and he's a freak. And this guy could be the starting left tackle for a long, long, long time in Jacksonville. And it's a no-brainer. They need to get help. Take Evan Neal and get this thing over with. The offensive line, I remember, if you guys remember, have been listening for a long time, last year's offensive line class was not very good. And I say that from a first-round standpoint. But this year, there's some guys, okay, and there's some discussion. If you look at the top 10 picks, you got the Lions there at 2, but you got the Jets and the Giants that both have 2 picks apiece in the top 10. And there is a ton of offensive line talent. And I just want to talk about a couple guys that you may have not heard of. But obviously Evan Neal can play from Alabama, needs to be the number 1 pick, and they need to get this thing over with. But there's this guy named Icky, and I can't even try to pronounce his last name, but it's Ekwonu at NC State. And he's arguably just as good, or I think he's a smidgen below where Evan is. But he's extremely athletic. He's going to be a starting left tackle. And you're looking at, he's going to be a top, I would say, I don't think he gets out of the top 5. So you're going to have 2 tackles taken there really early. The third guy that's getting talked about a lot is Charles Cross from Mississippi State. Know him, know his family. We recruited him very hard here at Ole Miss when I was here. Definitely a guy that from Laurel, Mississippi, a guy that we tried very desperately to get. We've liked from the jump. And a guy that really blew up even in the recruiting process because of how athletic he is. The upside, he's not as safe as the other 2 because he has immense upside to where he can reach that potential. But he is just a freak when it comes athletically. But he still has some development to do. He still has time to grow because he was very, very raw coming out of high school. And I think Mississippi State did a great job developing him. But he hasn't been there that long. So and he's going to continue to get better. And you're really looking at him playing 3 to 4 years of high-quality football, and his best football is ahead of him. So I think he's going to be a first-round pick, no question. But it'd be interesting to see how high he goes because the NFL does put a premium on tackles. But my 2 favorite, besides Evan Neal, my 2 favorite guys in the draft offensive line-wise is Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa. Okay, you guys have probably never watched this guy play football a day in your life. I actually came on to him at the Senior Bowl watching practices, so I went back and watched some tape on him. Is what an offensive lineman's supposed to be. Very nasty, has attitude, and he's athletic, can move his feet. He's going to be great in pass protection. The biggest issue that he has is hand placement. And I think, and I want all the fans to understand this, is when you're an offensive lineman, a tackle, and I think we've talked about Laramie Tunsil on here before, but if you watch Laramie Tunsil, who I think is the best tackle in the NFL. When he goes to shoot his hands, he hits, there's a little, what we call a little quarter-size spot right inside the armpit. And that's what you're trying to shoot for when you're shooting your hands as a tackle. And he never missed that spot, ever. I mean, his hand placement was impeccable. And that's just hard to find. And a lot of times Trevor gets his hand placement outside and in the wrong place and he loses leverage. But he is nasty. He can play. I think he's going to be a great player in the NFL, and he's going to play for a long, long time. So very excited to see where he goes. And then probably my favorite, besides Evan Neal, my favorite offensive line prospect is Tyler Linderbaum from Iowa, the center. This guy is nasty. He is a day one starter. He's going to come in, and he's getting, because he plays center only, he's going to slide down into the first round. And so you're talking about he's going to get on a team that's already good because they're drafting late, and he's going to start day one. I mean, this guy's a Pro Bowler day one at center. This guy can play as long as he stays healthy. He's going to play for a long, long, long time. All right, wide receivers. This is probably the most interesting group of receivers that's been in a while, probably since the A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf year. There are wide receivers everywhere. There are going to be wide receivers taken. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave from Ohio State are ballers. And I said this before, whoever's evaluating wide receivers at Ohio State knows what they're doing because they just keep loading them. They're going to go early. First-round guys. I think Christian Watson from North Dakota State, I think he's going to sneak in the first round somewhere. Not a lot of people know about him, but if you watch Mike Evans play, that's what you need to think. Very tall, very long guy that can run really fast. And so I think I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa takes a shot at him late because of Mike Evans and contracts and things like that. So that's who he reminds me of, and he's coming out of nowhere. But a couple guys I want to talk about specifically is Treylon Burks. I have loved this kid from the first second I saw him at Warren High School. Just an unbelievable talent. He's the closest thing I've seen to A.J. Brown, and those guys don't exist. A lot of guys you get are, all these other guys are in this mold, whether they're either tall or long and can run fast, or they're really, 6 foot, 5'11" guys that are just, speed demons. And those are kind of the two models that you see. And then there's Treylon Burks and there's A.J. Brown, who are kind of built differently. They're 6'2", 220-pound just beast. And they're strong runners after the catch. And what Treylon Burks did, I think he was probably the most undervalued player in the SEC last year. Unbelievable talent. We tried our ass off to get him here at Ole Miss, and Arkansas had him locked up because of Warren High School's relationship at Arkansas, and we couldn't even get the kid on a visit. I mean, we tried. It wasn't just us. It was everybody. So this kid kind of knew where he was going and really didn't play the recruiting game that hard because he knew where he wanted to go, and it probably affected his ranking because he didn't do a lot of interviews, and he was kind of a ghost. But everybody wanted him. Everybody tried to get him on a visit, and he had shut it down early and went to Arkansas, and what a talent. Very, very impressed with him. So I would put him in the same category as A.J. Brown. And to be honest, A.J. Brown's helping him out. A.J. Brown, when he left to come out, he was a second-round grade because of his speed, because he kind of broke the mold. They're like, well, that doesn't work in the NFL. Well, you see the success that A.J. Brown's had in the NFL, and I think that's giving Treylon some value with teams. So Treylon probably needs to thank A.J. for what he's done in the NFL because it's definitely going to help his value. The last guy I want to talk about is Jalen Tolbert. And Jalen, some of you may have heard about, some of you may have not. I recruited him to South Alabama and got to coach him before we left to come to Ole Miss. Just a phenomenal talent, a phenomenal human being. And he's probably going to be a second-round pick, I imagine. But a guy that can do it on the field. He's got the film to prove it. I think the knock on him was that he was at South Alabama, but a guy that's gone 1,500 yards, gone over 1,000, I don't know how many years in a row now. Phenomenal NFL prototype receiver, will be a starter. Unbelievable balance and body control, but a guy that has the mentality part of the game worked out, physically, mentally tough. He went through a stretch there, and if he does have a knock, he went through a stretch where he got injured, and he had to come back, and it was a devastating injury, and he came back better than he was before, and he spent 3 years proving that he came over the injury. So I'm so excited for him and his family. A guy that people ask me all the time, like what's the best recruiting job you think you're, who's the guy you ever got that you shouldn't have gotten? And Jalen Tolbert's my number one, even though I was at South Alabama. Um, we legitly straight up beat Michigan State and Vanderbilt for him when we were at South Alabama, and we got him to stay home. And that was a big get for us, and he's proven worth it. So if you're a Michigan State fan, I apologize. He could have been playing for you, but that's probably where he was going. But we got him to stay at home, and he's just a phenomenal human being, a phenomenal talent. I'm so excited for him and his family for what he gets to experience here next week. All right, to the quarterbacks. I don't know why I just didn't start with them. Malik Willis has been getting all the pub in the world, and we've talked about it for 2 or 3 weeks now. Malik Willis is an example of how you blow up past after the season's over with and workouts and things like that, because he is a phenomenal talent. He has a rocket launcher attached to his right shoulder. He has got probably the strongest arm in the draft. I don't know who would have a stronger arm. But again, my deal goes back to quarterbacks is just a funny position because you have to have them. That's what runs the league. And we'll talk about that in the USFL. We talk about them in a little bit. But if you watch the USFL over the weekend, one thing that you notice was quarterback play. And so with this league being the way it is and people needing quarterbacks, and that's what you win with. Very, very few times you look who's winning in the NFL and look who's at quarterback. You don't see teams that have bad quarterbacks winning games. That's just how the league's driven. And so that's why there's a premium put on this position. Now, with Malik, he has an unbelievable upside. If he ever got to where his potential is, he's all world. But then I always refer back to quarterbacks is look at the game film. You just don't see many times of quarterbacks being successful in unsuccessful or not the premier quarterback in college football and then turn out to be a great guy in the NFL. And what makes him special is his feet, and he can move. And when it comes nut cutting time, he's on the move. He breaks the pocket. He can, he gets you the 3rd and 10s that nobody's open. He can do that, and he can extend plays. But the NFL is a throwing league. This is not college. And over again, we put these value on these guys that can run but don't throw great, and see what they do when they get to the NFL. And it's like last year. We're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole with Justin Fields, and what has he done throwing the football? Now, he can run, he can do those things, but you have to throw the football every down. And you look who the premier players are in the NFL, they do it with their arm. And I just, and everybody says, oh, well, Lamar Jackson. Well, that's true. I'm with you there. But here's the problem is in the NFL, there's a 17-game season. In college, there's a 12-game season. And then they got the playoffs, and then they got preseason. So they're playing almost 2 full seasons as opposed to 1 season in college. And everybody's like, well, math doesn't add up. Well, let me explain something to you. Let's take a 12-game regular season. Malik Willis is not playing all 4 quarters in all 12 games. They're going to blow people out, and he's going to take, half a game off here. He's going to take a half a game off there. And so he ends up playing probably 9.5 to 10 games a year in college. That's the normal. Because the backup plays the rest of the time when you play, directional schools. All right. Well, then in the NFL, they don't take you out. You stay in there the whole game. And very few NFL games are there blowouts to where the backup goes in and plays. If you watch the NFL, and I do, I love it now that I've been able to watch it. But the NFL always comes down to that last possession. Most of the games are 4th quarter games in the NFL. Those guys are playing, and so they're getting hit more. And so running quarterbacks cannot stay healthy, a.k.a. Lamar Jackson. Like if you look at guys that use their feet, they have a tough time staying healthy. That's just the facts. And so eventually you have to do it with your arm. And as he's talented enough to do it, yes. Has he shown he can win a game with his arm? I don't think not at that level. At some levels he has, but somebody's going to take him because of the upside, and we'll see what they do. I'm not a fan of burning a top 10 pick on him. But it is what it is. I want to talk a little bit about Matt Corral. I've said it, and I know I'm biased here, and it is what it is. I can be biased. That's the guy I'm going to war with. I love everything about the kid. That's if I had my pick, that's who I'm going with, but I'm biased too. I think he's got the it factor. Whatever it is, he has it. He's a competitor. He's got the arm talent. He's got everything it takes to be a quarterback on that level. And I'll kind of look forward to see what happens. And if he gets drafted, and somebody's going to draft him, and somebody's going to draft him high, if he gets drafted and there's a vet there, they better buckle up, because I think this is the guy come take your job. He's got that kind of mentality. I love everything about the kid, and you can't go wrong with Matt. We'll talk a little bit more about it next week probably, but for me, Matt Corral is who I'm going with a quarterback if I'm spending a higher draft pick, because I just think he's the safest. Kenny Pickett, which we know is going to be there. Sam Howell is going to be there. A lot of talk about Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati, and then the one I got to throw out there, I would if I'm okay at quarterback, the guy I'm drafting in the third or fourth round, I'm taking Bailey Zappi at Western Kentucky. Look, this guy can play. He reminds me a lot of Chase Daniel, a guy that you'll never, you'll only need him if he goes in the game, but at least he can spin it, and it's a throwing league. And so Bailey Zappi, we've been talking about forever, even back with Hard Edge with my man Rich Rod. I love the guy, and I look forward to seeing what he does in the NFL. A couple of corners I want to talk about going in the draft. Corners is probably one of the hardest positions to evaluate, because you don't want them to show up on film. If they're not showing up on film, there's usually a reason. It usually takes the all-22 to really grade them. So it's really hard for the fans to differentiate who's good at corner, who's not. And it could be, if you've got a really good front seven, they might not even get the ball off. But a couple of guys is look, and we talked about Sauce Gardner here during the college football playoff at Cincinnati. Look, I call a spade a spade. He really proved me wrong. I thought he was going to get ate up a little bit against better competition, and he held his own, and he was doing it against great players. Really earned himself. I think a lot of people had doubts on him going into the college football playoff, and in one game, that's all you got to do is turn on the Alabama game. He made himself a bunch of money. He went from being probably a late round pick to early. I mean, he's probably going to be – I would be absolutely mortifiedly shocked if he's not the first corner off the board, because I think there's a big – I think it's him, and then I think there's everybody else. Really good player. And everybody's going to be like, well, what do you think about this Trent McDuffie guy at Washington that's getting a lot of love? And this is what I want to explain to the fans. Arm length is a big deal when you're playing corner. And it's a big deal at defensive line. It's a big deal on offensive line. Arm length is a big deal in a lot of places, and especially at corner. And let me explain that to people, because the game of football is not played by wingspan, by spreading your arms out. The game of football is played, with your arms going forward. Well, Trent, he's got 29-inch arms, okay, in change. It's like 29 and 3 something, whatever it is, 3/8, 3/4, whatever it is. Those are really short arms. And he's already like 5'11". Okay, so he's sub 6 foot, and he's got short arms. And in a league where you can't, then you have to be long, because in the NFL, after 5 yards, you can't contact the guy. And so arm length comes in a big difference. And so if you're going against a receiver that has 34-inch arms and you got 29-inch arms, okay, that's about that much difference. Okay, so that's that much closer than you have to be to a guy. And in the NFL, they'll find a window for that. I'm not drafting a corner early in the draft that's got 29-inch arms. He is a phenomenal player. I would probably even stay away from all corners in general that have 29-inch arms. I think it's very difficult to play man-to-man when you have short arms, so especially in the NFL. So it makes it even worse. So I'm staying away from him. The other two is Derek Stingley Jr. that people argue about. Derek Stingley Jr. for me as a freshman was unbelievable. I just haven't seen it in 2 years. And so he just has been a guy. And again, a good guy, can play. But just hasn't continued the dominance as what he was as a freshman. He's kind of just he hasn't really hit the improve button. So I think he's a talent. I think he's going to play. Wouldn't waste a high draft pick, but I would probably take him late one. But he'll probably with a value and just not as many corners on the board. He does have the length. He does have the speed and those things. If you turn on the freshman tape, you're a no-brainer. You turn on the later tape, you're like, okay. The last guy I want to tell a little bit of story about is Roger McCrary at Auburn. So Roger, facts, was committed to me at South Alabama for like 8 months. Nobody else recruited him from Williamson High School in Mobile, Alabama. He played all over the place, played literally every position. One play he'd be at receiver, running back, quarterback, defense. He played everywhere. Loved him. Nobody really took the time to go in there because they were like, how can they have a good player? They were awful his junior year. They were like 2-8. But this guy just kept showing up, and like he made literally every play. It was a one-man wrecking crew. He made every play all over the place. So we get fired at South Alabama, and I come to Ole Miss. And in the time before coming to Ole Miss, Kevin Steele, a good friend of mine, says, "Hey, who's committed to you that you didn't?" This is 3 weeks before I come to Ole Miss. He's like, "I didn't know I was coming to Ole Miss at the time, or I wouldn't have said this. I can promise you that. I didn't know what I was going to do." And he said, "Who do you got? Who's committed to you think can play in the SEC?" And I was like, "You need to go look at this Roger McCrary kid. Nobody's recruiting the kid, and I don't understand why." And Kevin comes down and watches him and likes him and offers him. The rest is history. Then I go to Ole Miss, and he's out there playing as a true freshman. I was like, "Damn! I wish I'd have waited a couple of weeks, and know if I could have known the future, I could have got him at Ole Miss. But I didn't know I was coming to Ole Miss at the time. So, congratulations, Auburn, and I'm sorry to the Ole Miss fans. I just couldn't read my crystal ball fast enough. I could have got him to Oxford, Mississippi, but." Very good player, just a great kid. And Ole Miss fans, I'll let you roll your eyes at me, but I call him 5 for 5, guys. He's it. He is an unbelievable kid, competitive kid. I'm excited for him and his family. He deserves everything he can get. He's just a phenomenal human being. I'm excited for him and what's coming next week. All right, a couple more guys I want to talk about, then we're going to get on to the NIL stuff. Aiden Hutchinson, everybody thinks this guy's number one pick in the draft, and I don't see it. I think he's a good player. I think he's a great player. And I think he's a first-round pick. I just don't see the dominance. Like when I think of defensive end, that's the number one pick. I'm thinking Jadeveon Clowney, guys that are just wrecking shop, athletic freaks, just everything. And to me, he's a motor guy. And he's a guy that's good athletically. He's tough and all that stuff, but he makes it with good effort. And good effort is not good enough in the NFL because everybody plays with great effort because their lives are on the line and their livelihood. And so I think he's a solid player. I just don't see him being the number one pick. I don't get it. As opposed to when you look at Thibodeau, that's coming out of Oregon, he's an athletic freak. That's the guy that can make plays when he plays hard because he's an athletic freak. And people are like, well, this and that and this and that. I don't know. I don't see Aiden being the dominant defense. I could be wrong. I mean, I've been wrong before. I just don't see him being the dominant guy, number one pick that needs to be taken up there. Trayvon Walker at Georgia is a guy that's blown up through the board because of what he did athletically. Again, great player on tape, but he was surrounded by a bunch of great players. So he kind of like disappeared a little bit because he wasn't the only guy. But between the end of the season and through the combine process, this guy's blown up because he's a freakazoid. I mean, he runs fast, all that stuff. And I think the defensive line and edge position in particular is loaded this year. You got Jordan Davis at Georgia, obviously different position. You got Thibodeau we talked about. And then the Karlaftis kid at Purdue, edge player, very similar to Aiden Hutchinson, in my opinion. And we're saying this guy is a mid-round pick, and we're saying Aiden's number one pick because Aiden had the really good game. But go watch Aiden play against Georgia. That's the only thing. And maybe it was the last time I was on the field, and maybe that's why it's sticking in my head. But he never showed up. He didn't have one tackle. I don't think he had one tackle in the whole game. He just never showed up in the game, and that's against Georgia. What's he going to do against the Detroit Lions? That's a bad. What's he going to do against Cincinnati? What's he going to do against the Patriots? And we're talking about what he's doing in college, and I just don't see it. But for whatever reason, it is what it is. But you got Mafia from Minnesota, just a whole category that's loaded with players. And the one I want to talk about, especially since we have that's close to my heart, is a guy named Sam Williams, here from Ole Miss. Recruited him twice. When I was at South Alabama, was a guy that's these guys don't fall off the wagon very often. He was probably 6'2", probably 205, 210 coming out of high school. Was a non-qualifier from Robert E. Lee High School in Montgomery, and just didn't qualify, but like I knew who he was. Just he was an okay player. You could see ability, but you're like, oh, he's undersized. There were a lot of things there. So then he goes Northeast Community College in Boonville and just blows up and becomes who he is today. He turns in and he's like, I remember turning on the tape and I was like, this guy's raw. I said, but you can see the burst. He was really stiff. There was a lot of things. And I was like, he's got like a hitch or something. It was something that really bothered me on the film. And then when we called and did some investigation, this guy's playing with a torn meniscus. Well, just so you know, when you have a torn meniscus, you're out. I mean, it takes 2 to 3 to, if you have the easy surgery, it's 2 weeks, and you don't come back 100% even after that. This guy just plays right through it. He never misses a game. And just unbelievable toughness and mentality. And, he shows up for camp. And at the time he walks in the door, I'm like, oh my God. Like, it's just like this eye-opening moment. You're like, that's what they're supposed to look like. Like, he looks different than everybody. And he goes and he jumps like 35 inches or whatever it was. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, like, people aren't supposed to do that. And then my favorite is when he goes and he runs the 40. And one of my guys comes over and says, hey, coach, he ran a 4.4 40. And I was like, bullshit. I was like, he's like, no, he did. So I literally stopped what I was doing. I was talking to somebody, and I get a watch and I go over there and ask him to run it again. And he did it again. And after that, I was like, you got to take the guy to see what happens. And but that's not what I'm proud about Sam. He's always had the athletic ability, but I'm not going into it on here of any recruit that I've ever been a part of in my entire life in 22 years has overcome his circumstance that no one else has been able to do. He's had every reason in this world to quit. He's had every reason in this world not to be successful. And he's done it. I am so happy for the person he's become. I am so happy for what he's been through to get here. Like, this people don't know, and I'm not going to go into it because it's very personal, but what he has gone through, you couldn't even imagine. And if you're a movie guy out there, and there's been The Blind Side, that was a pretty good movie, and there's been all these movies about stuff like this, none of them hold a remote candle. And as bad as you can possibly imagine, this is probably the worst background circumstance I've ever been a part of in my life. And there's some people probably listening that work with us and know the story, and they're shaking their head because they know that I'm right. The media doesn't know. I can't describe to you guys how much he has overcome to be where he's at today, and I'm so proud of him. I'm so happy for what he's doing, and it's because the NFL will dig, and the NFL's found out some things, I'm sure, and that's probably why they're going to get some value, because they're like, that's what the NFL does. This is a first-round player, and it's not even close. He is a first-round player, and people are saying, well, I don't know background. He's proven wrong at every level. Somebody's about to get the best value that they've ever gotten on a defensive player. Sam Williams, so excited for him and what's about to come. But everybody, make sure, if you don't know who Sam Williams is, learn him, and you will be a fan of Sam Williams. All right, a couple other guys before we get on to the NIL. Kyle Hamilton, the safety at Notre Dame. Unbelievable player. I think he's getting dinged a little bit because he didn't run as well as everybody thought he was going to run, but it doesn't matter. Kyle Hamilton, Pro Bowler safety, probably the best safety in the draft, maybe the best DB in the draft, period. This kid can play. Sign him up. Kyle Hamilton, safety from Notre Dame. If you need somebody on the back ends, whoever needs one is going to get him early. And so that's a good one there. Then we got our good friend Nakobe Dean from Georgia. That's probably going to be a mid to late round pick, I'd imagine. And very interesting there, but just an instinctive dude, smart. Obviously we recruited him, and as of about, I would say, thought we had him here at Ole Miss until about 9. I can tell you the exact time. It was 9:42 a.m. is when I was like, oh shit, we're in trouble. And at 9:41, I was happy because we were getting him. But at 9:42 a.m., because I remember looking at my watch going, how much time do we have left till he announces? 9:42 a.m. signing day is when I was like, we're in trouble. Had no idea before then because went to bed feeling pretty good. But Nakobe, one of the craziest recruiting deals. We've had some wrong here. He knows if he's listening, he knows 9:42, some wrong. Because I was with him when the clock hit 9:42. Like the kid, like the family. I don't hold any grudges. Just sure wish he was at Ole Miss. I probably would still be there, but he's a really good player, instinctive, coach on the field, knows probably the most instinctive, knowledgeable linebacker probably since Luke Kuechly went out with the Carolina. He's that kind of player. I think he's going to have a great career as long as he stays healthy, and excited for him and his family. He got who he was looking for, 3 years and out, NFL. Congratulations. And the last one that I want to talk about, I'm doing this from my man Matt Luke and my man Claykarcher, is Breece Hall. And if you're an Ole Miss fan, you have no idea how close you were to having Breece Hall in your backfield, because that was one of those 3 stars that y'all were laughing at us about recruiting. But really liked Breece Hall. And Claykarcher, I give him a man Clay, who's working with us here now. He's been my right-hand guy for a long time. Clay finds Breece Hall. So he's like, this running back from Kansas. And we're like, what? And so Clay is also the same guy, ironically, who found Josh Jacobs at Alabama. So Clay has a knack for finding these running backs. And so he brings Breece Hall to us. Unbelievable. But he just wasn't playing against anybody. The talent level was bad. And everybody was like, well, I don't know if he can run. I love the kid. We tried like hell to get him passed, and we ended up taking a guy named Snoop Connor. So I guess it all pans out. But we basically had a decision to make between Snoop Connor and Breece Hall. I think both of them. I mean, you could make the argument that if Snoop was at Iowa State in offense, he'd be doing the same thing, because I think that much of Snoop Connor. But we ended up taking Snoop instead of Breece Hall. I was on the Breece Hall train. Clay was on the Breece Hall train, and everybody else was on the Snoop Connor train. So it all worked out for everybody. But just a phenomenal player, phenomenal kid. He's probably going to be him and Isaiah Spiller, probably the 2 running backs that have a chance to go in the first round. But Breece Hall is an every down back in the NFL. He's a bigger back. But the hard part with the NFL is running backs don't last very long. So I think that's the trick there. But we'll talk a little bit more about the draft next week. I wanted to make sure that you got a little draft, some names, a little information about some draft guys, so you'll have something to talk about next week when all the draft coverage comes up, and you won't look like you don't know what you're talking about. So make sure you remember all that information, all those stories, and you can share with your friends. All right, I want to shift, which we've talked about ad nauseum, and we've talked about this for a while, but I had some more stuff come up on NIL last week, and I just like, oh my gosh. So let's start with the Arch Manning. Okay, so we know that Nico Lamalavea, I think I got that right, Lamalavea, is reportedly to get between 7 and 8. I've heard the number was closer to 7, but reports are out there that's closer to 8, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a lot of money that they're getting to go play college football. All right. And then Arch Manning, I get called probably it was a week before last. I get a call, and then I got another call, and then I got another call, and everybody's coming up with the same number. So this is either a really good rumor or it's accurate. That $10 million is being thrown out there for Arch Manning. $10 million. $10 million. So let's take this into account here. Let's put some reference on this. So at $8 million, which is what Nico's getting, or close to it, that's essentially what the 47th pick in the NFL draft is getting. So you're saying coming out of high school, you're in the middle of a second-round pick. Like they're getting that much money, the same amount of guaranteed money that the middle of the second round is getting for $8 million. And let's take Arch at $10 million, if that number is accurate. We're paying him as the 32nd pick in the NFL draft, a first-round pick. That's what we're paying this guy. And that's good. If you want to spend it, spend it. Okay? But at what point does a quarterback turn into a bust when you're paying them that kind of money? So you're basically paying them guaranteed you're going to have to be a first-round pick. And let's look back. I want everybody to do this. And we're going to talk about rivals since we're on MPW Digital and Neil and those guys are rivals guys. Let's talk about rivals. If you go back and look at who's been their top 5-star guys and the top ranked guys, go back and look. Just go year after year, okay? Because I did it yesterday just for shits and giggles, okay? You can say Caleb Williams from 2021. You can say Caleb Williams. He's worth the money. Absolutely. But for every Caleb Williams, how do you think Clemson feels right now with DJ? Ugalele, or however you pronounce his name. He was a 5-star. He was like number 3 overall prospect. Has he been worth? If you paid him $10 million, would he be worth it? Probably not. You probably wouldn't be happy. I mean, we can go over and over and over. Bryce Young, absolutely worth every penny and then some. But my point is this: is for every quarterback, and fans need to know this. For all these quarterbacks, like if you look like Matt Corral, was he a highly ranked guy? Yeah, but you're not paying $10 million for a guy like that. You can, like these high ranked guys, a lot of them don't work out. Tennessee with a Bailey kid, they're already paid this guy. Bailey was a 5-star guy like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whenever it was. Well, they would have paid him the money, and now they're already replacing him. And so my point of the drill is this: is what is a bust when this kind of money is involved? If Arch Manning doesn't come in and be the best quarterback in the country, how's that? And what if it doesn't work out? Because a lot of these guys don't pan out. Are they talented? Yes. Yes. But quarterbacks is one of the biggest misses out there. And I don't even know if fans even, I mean, I'm sure you think about that, but like for every big time player, like Malik Willis, let's take Malik Willis, for example. Malik Willis is going to be a first round pick. I think we talked about him earlier, right? The guy got cut from Auburn 3 years ago. He got cut. So Gus Malzahn didn't think he was good enough to play at Auburn. Like, let's think about this. This guy was cut. I don't even know what Kenny Pickett was ranked, but you're not paying a guy like that millions of dollars. Sam Howell was like a 4-star guy. But for everyone, go back and look at those guys, and you don't even remember or know what happened to them. Like JT Daniels, highly ranked guy. Highly ranked guy. Didn't do it at Southern Cal. Goes to Georgia and didn't do it at Georgia. Now he's going to West Virginia. Highly ranked guy. Are you paying $10 million for that? Like, what point is it a bust? And so what I'm interested in knowing is here's the kicker now. Okay, is all of these collectives. I'm put it on, if you're watching on YouTube, on Home Visit Siskey on YouTube, I'm going to put them in quotes. All right, collectives. They're paying these guys this amount of money, and so what they're paying is like, okay, first year you're going to make $350, next year you're going to make $1 million, next year we'll pay you $5 million. You know, whatever it is they're staggering these payments out to keep them from going in the portal and transferring. That's what they're doing with the payments. So they're not getting $10 million up front. They're getting X amount of dollars year one, X amount of dollars year two, so on and so forth. Okay. If the guy is a bust, you want the guy to leave, because now you're not on the hook for the money. But now you've set up the collective deal to where he's getting that amount of money. Okay, so let's say this, and I don't think he will be, but let's say Arch is a bust. Okay, let's say Arch is not your best quarterback, and you want him to leave. Arch ain't going anywhere because he's getting paid. He's going to get more money to stay. So your payroll is going to be backed up. These guys, if they don't work out and they are a bust, they're not going anywhere because they're going to collect on their money. Because if they go somewhere else, they're losing value. Who would leave? Like nobody's going to leave. And so you're setting up these collectives, and you better hope you get it right, because let me tell you something. I don't know if it's Arch. I don't know if it's Nico. I don't know who it is. But this isn't slowing down. This is getting worse. It's just a matter of time, just like we tell everybody all the other times, and that look, stuff's coming like NIL, it'll have a cap. Nope, getting worse. Been trying to tell you for a year, getting worse. You don't know what you're doing. But this will happen, is that school X is going to pay X amount of dollars for a kid, and that's going to be there to keep them there. Okay, so we don't want you transferring. Well, that kid's going to be a bust. It's going to be one of them. Like I said, go back and look at the Rivals rankings. Look at 247. I don't care what ranking you look at. Go look at all those 5-star guys. And, yeah, there's going to be a Caleb Williams. There's going to be a Bryce Young. But for every one of those, there's 5 guys you've never heard of because they're not playing, and they're bust. Okay, so just like there's bust in the NFL draft, there's going to be bust in this. So what happens? But in the NFL, and this is what I heard Mike Leach talking about this the other day, it was ingenious. In the NFL, guess what happens when you're a bust? They cut your ass and they don't have to pay you. This is different. This is a collective deal. This has nothing. They can't not pay you if you have a signed contract. Okay, there is no cut, and there's no stipulations in the contracts, because if they had stipulations in the contract, they're going to go to the school that doesn't have stipulations in the contract, because there are those doing that. Okay, look at who's getting the good players. This is follow the money, guys. Okay, this has been going on a long time. Follow the money. And so, for me, it's like what is a bust when if you're paying $10 million, so you're paying the guy to be the first round pick. When is he a bust? So you got to think about that. So I think that's the next thing coming with NIL is when these kids don't pan out. We got to figure out what we're doing. We got a problem on our hands. And thank you. And by the way, if you didn't see it, Nick Saban goes on a whole deal about NIL and all this stuff about all this mess. But it finally took somebody like that to say something to get attention. Lane says something, it gets attention. Coaches need to be vocal about this. That's a problem. Okay, when it comes to the NCAA, if you want something fixed, because everybody thinks it's a problem, it's just a matter if they're saying it or not and what they're saying about it. Yes, players should be getting paid. I'm all for that. But $10 million to play quarterback, and we don't even know, you're good, but it's a different game. Okay, it's a huge mess, and coaches need to be vocal. More coaches need to be vocal so they can try to do something about it because they're not stopping it. But you better do something because it's already the rock is rolling downhill, and you got to do something to slow it down because it's just getting faster and faster and faster, and it's not slowing down. So they need to do something now because every day that goes by, it gets further and further out of control. So they got to do something, or it's going to mess everything up. All right, I hope everybody got a chance to watch some USFL football. If you didn't, you got to be a football fan. I think the biggest problem with it is a lot of guys you don't know and you don't have allegiance to a particular team. And it's kind of hard to do that. Pull for the New Jersey Generals if you're up in the Northeast when they're all playing in Birmingham, you can't even go see a game. And so that's going to be a tough thing for them to get over right now. But our good friend David Beatty's coaching wide receivers for the Houston Gamblers. Got to see him yesterday. But I heard a lot of talk about, the product on the field, blah, 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 blah. Guys, these guys have been together 3 weeks. They've been together 3 weeks. Each week that goes by, it'll get better. Quarterback play struggled a little bit because they've been with each other for 3 weeks. And a lot of these guys haven't done anything because they haven't been on NFL rosters or whatever reason they've been cut. They've lost a lot of development time. So don't give up on the USFL because I think the AFL, where it was called the AAFL, what it was before COVID hit, was actually doing really good, and it helps some guys. And I think as each week that goes on, I think you're going to see the product on the field get better and better and better. But look, man, it's football, and it's in the spring. It's better. I had it on yesterday when we were doing Easter dinner at the house. So got a chance. It's football in the spring, and it's better than not watching football in the spring. So make sure you support that and all that good stuff and enjoy it and take it for what it is. But if you got to understand, you're not watching the Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears. It's USFL football. It's what it's supposed to be. But give it time. The product will get better. All right, this week we got Talladega this weekend. So, look, if you see me at Talladega, come up and say hello. I know I'll be there. We'll be there with some friends that you may or may not recognize. Previous home visit guest will probably be joining me in Talladega. Come by and say hello. We'd love to see you. We'll probably try to get some stuff out there to you from Talladega. If you've never been, we got a lot of people who I don't watch NASCAR. Don't knock it till you try it. And if you want to get hooked on NASCAR, go to Talladega. It's the best thing out there. That's back home, just right down the road from my hometown. I've been a bunch. I can't tell you how many times. But to the point where I used to, I better not. Well, I guess I can. Nobody cares. I used to schedule my spring recruiting around Talladega, so I would make sure I was in the Birmingham, Northeast Alabama area on Friday to go to the race, and then would start there again on Monday. So I'd stay out, but I love it. It's when you go, it's like redneck Mardi Gras. It's a good time. So everybody needs to go check it out. And then if you're there, and we probably have a lot of people listening that are there, come by and say hello. I'll be around a little bit everywhere. Be infield in the suites and the stands. We'll be a little bit everywhere in the garage. We'll be there. Come by and say hello, and make sure you subscribe. Listen. Home Visit Siskey on Twitter. Home Visit Siskey on YouTube. Subscribe. Leave us a 3-star review. MPW Digital. Monster Energy. Make sure you have a sugar-free Monster when you're rocking and rolling at Talladega. It goes good with Tito's. Good stuff. But until next time, take care.